I worked 2 jobs since 15, never asked for help, and bought my first home at 28. A week later, my parents sued me, saying it should belong to my sister. The judge made them turn red. I stood in front of a small house with blue shutters, clutching a bunch of keys so tightly that the metal dug into my palm. 28 years old, 13 years of working 2 jobs. And here it was, mine, only mine. The house was far from perfect. The paint on the porch was peeling, the drain pipe was slightly bent, and one of the windows was cracked. The porch creaked under my feet when I stepped on it. The wooden steps were worn in the middle, probably from dozens of people coming in and out of the house over the years, but it was mine, bought with money I had earned with my own hands. Every penny I had earned smelled of hair chemicals from the salon and coffee. I opened the door and walked inside, feeling the tension of 13 years finally lift from my shoulders. I walked into the small kitchen where the previous owners had left an old refrigerator that hummed like a tractor. The wallpaper on the walls was yellow striped, peeling off in one corner. An old range hood covered with a layer of old grease hung above the stove, and I put the keys on the counter. It was all mine, 15 years old. That's when I realized that no one cared about me and that I would have to fight for myself in life. I remember that evening very clearly. We were sitting at the kitchen table, me, Mom, Dad, and Vivian. My older sister had just graduated from high school and was planning to go to college to study accounting. My parents were discussing how much they would have to pay for tuition, dormitory, textbooks. My dad ran his finger over the numbers and frowned. My mom nervously twirled a teaspoon in her hands. I listened and thought about my future. I still had 3 years until graduation, but I was already dreaming about college, about my career, about who I would become, maybe a teacher or a veterinarian. I had always loved animals. Dad leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, we'll have to tighten our belts. But Vivian is worth it. She's a smart girl. She'll do well." Mom nodded. Of course. We always knew Viv would go far. Remember when she won the math competition in 8th grade? How could I forget? Dad smiled. Vivian smiled modestly and lowered her eyes. She always knew how to look so gentle and proper. I sat quietly, waiting for the conversation to turn to me, but it didn't. They talked about Vivian, about her future, about how she would be able to find a good job and help the family. Dad said something about how accountants are always in demand and that Vivian would have a stable salary. Mom added that she would be able to get a job at a good company, maybe even in the city. Finally, I plucked up my courage. And when I finished school, where do you think would be the best place for us to go? There was a moment of silence. Dad looked at me as if he had just remembered that I was sitting at the table too. Mom paused with the teapot in her hand. "Emily, you understand that we can't pay for 2, Dad said slowly, as if explaining something obvious. Mom added more gently, putting the teapot on the table. "Vivian needs it more, dear. She has a talent for math, and well, you're more creative. Maybe you'll find something else. It doesn't have to be college, right?" Vivian sat across from me and stared at her plate. She didn't stand up for me. She didn't even look at me. She just sat there quietly, stirring her half-empty cup of tea with a spoon. I felt my face burning. My throat tightened so much that it was hard to swallow. I nodded, quietly said, "I understand," and went to my room. No one called me back. That night, I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. Through the thin wall, I could hear my parents talking in their bedroom. Muted voices, sometimes laughter. I was 15 years old, and I just realized that I wouldn't get a penny for college. If I wanted something, I would have to get it myself. No one was going to help me. 2 weeks later, I started working as an assistant at a beauty salon near my school. I noticed the ad in the window by accident when I was walking from the bus stop. Part-time assistant needed. I went inside. It smelled of hairspray and some kind of floral shampoo. A woman in her 50s with bright red hair was sitting by the mirror. The owner, a woman named Judy, looked at me skeptically at first. "How old are you, child?" 15, but I'm hardworking, and I really need this job. Judy agreed to take me on Saturdays and after school. I washed sinks, swept the floor of mountains of cut hair, brought coffee to customers, and washed towels in a small laundry room in the backyard. Judy paid me a small amount of money, a little more than the pocket money my classmates received from their parents for free, but she promised to teach me how to cut hair if I proved I was worth it. I proved it, every day. When I was 18, my parents said it was time for me to leave, and they wouldn't take no for an answer. Vivian finished college and came home looking for a job. She needed my room. It was bigger and brighter. Mom said this at dinner, between words. Dad just nodded and continued eating. I packed my things into 2 bags. Clothes, a few books, a photo of us with my grandmother who died when I was 12. I left without saying goodbye. I rented a tiny room in the house of an old widow, Mrs. Clark. She rented rooms to students and those who couldn't afford anything else. The room was tiny, with a window facing the blank brick wall of the neighboring building. But it had my bed, a small table, and a wardrobe. And no one told me I was unwanted there. I started working as a waitress on the night shift at a roadside restaurant. By then, Judy had allowed me to cut customers' hair and even raise my salary. I became a real hairdresser, albeit without a diploma. I worked day after day, year after year. Morning shift at the salon, evening shift at the restaurant. Sometimes I worked 14 hours a day. My hands smelled of hair dye and fried potatoes. My fingers cracked painfully. My legs throbbed with fatigue from standing all day. I hardly saw my family. They didn't call or invite me to celebrations. Once I met my mother in the supermarket. She said, "Hello," asked how I was doing, but the conversation lasted 2 minutes. Then she looked at her watch and said she was in a hurry. I existed somewhere on the sidelines of their lives, far away and invisible. But I was saving money, every dollar, every cent. For 10 years, I saved up for my own house. I looked at real estate ads and dreamed, and here it is. Mine, I bought it at auction for debts. A small ad in the newspaper, a quick procedure, signing the documents. No one wanted this little house on the outskirts of town. I was the only one who applied. They even lowered the price for me, and I still had some of my savings left. I stood in the empty kitchen and felt something crack inside me, like old ice on a river in spring. I did it all by myself, without their help, without their approval, without their love. A week later, I had a day off. I woke up late, at 10 in the morning, which was an incredible luxury. I made coffee in the old Turkish coffee pot I had brought from Mrs. Clark's room and planned what to buy for the house. There was a knock at the door. I jumped. I wasn't expecting anyone. I thought maybe the neighbors had decided to say hello. The mailman was standing on the doorstep with a large yellow envelope. "Emily Creswell?" "Yes." "Sign here." I signed, took the envelope, and closed the door. I went back to the kitchen and put the envelope on the counter. I opened it. Inside was a court summons. I read the text once, twice, 3 times. The words blurred before my eyes. My parents and Vivian had sued me. They demanded that I transfer the house to Vivian, claiming that it belonged to her by right of family ownership, since it had previously belonged to her ex-husband, Curtis Dahmer. I didn't even know his last name. Vivian got married 5 years ago, but I wasn't at the wedding. I wasn't invited. They divorced a year or 2 ago. I found out by accident from Judy, who heard it from someone at the salon. Something about Curtis getting into debt. But they want to take my house away from me. The house I bought legally. The house I worked for 13 years to buy. That was more important. The next day, I went to my parents' house. I didn't call. I just took the bus and knocked on the door. Mom opened the door, saw me, and looked surprised for a moment, as if she had forgotten she had a second daughter. "Emily, what are you doing here? I need to talk to you, to all of you." She hesitated for a moment, then let me in. The house hadn't changed. The same brown sofa in the living room with worn armrests. The same smell of my mother's perfume and my father's tobacco. There were photos on the wall, mostly of Vivian. Her graduation photo, her wedding photo, a photo from some corporate party. There were no photos of me. Dad was sitting in an armchair with a newspaper. He looked at me over his glasses but said nothing. Vivian was standing by the window with a cup in her hands. She was wearing a neat sweater and jeans. She looked like she had just stepped out of a catalog. I put the court documents on the table. "Are you serious?" Dad didn't even look at the papers. He folded the newspaper, took off his glasses, and wiped them on the edge of his shirt. "It's fair, Emily. That house should belong to Vivian. I bought it at auction. Legally." Vivian turned around. She looked older than I remembered. She had dark circles under her eyes and a tired face. She had lost the sparkle she always had. "You knew it was our house, the Curtis house. You bought it on purpose to hurt us." Her voice was tearful, pitiful. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I didn't even know it used to belong to your ex. I was just looking for a cheap house and found the ad. I had no idea." Mom intervened, crossing her arms over her chest. "Don't make things up, Emily. It's too much of a coincidence." I looked at them. These people who were supposed to be my family and didn't recognize anyone. "I don't owe you anything," I said, quietly but clearly. "I earned this house myself." Dad grimaced. "Don't be selfish. Vivian is having a hard time right now. She needs support, and you're going to take her property away from her." "Don't lie that you didn't know," I laughed. Shortly, bitterly. The laugh was bitter, almost hysterical. Then I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. No one called me back. I only heard Mom quietly say to Vivian, "Don't worry, dear. We'll take care of everything." I sat in my empty house that evening on the living room floor, leaning my back against the cold wall. There was nothing around me. No furniture, no paintings, not even curtains on the windows. Just me and the court summons in my hands. The paper trembled. Well, my hands were shaking. They wouldn't back down, I knew that, but I couldn't back down either. I found the law office in the phone book. A small sign on the second floor of an old brick building in the city center. Thomas Grinner, attorney at law. I climbed the stairs, which creaked under my feet, and knocked on the glass door, behind which a human silhouette was blurred. "Come in," a man's voice said. Thomas Grinner turned out to be a man in his 60s, with thinning gray hair and thin-rimmed glasses. The office was filled with cabinets full of files, and piles of documents were scattered across the desk. It smelled of old paper and coffee. "Please, have a seat," he said, pointing to a chair across from his desk. "Tell me everything." I told him everything. About the house, the auction, the lawsuit from my parents and Vivian. Grinner listened attentively, occasionally taking notes in a yellow notebook. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Do you have all the purchase documents?" I took a folder out of my bag. It contained the purchase agreement, payment receipts, and auction certificate. Grinner looked through them carefully, checked something several times, then looked up. "The case is simple from a legal standpoint. You purchase the property legally at a public auction. The only question is what their lawsuit is based on. They may claim that the auction was conducted improperly, or that they have a preemptive right of purchase as relatives. But if the auction was organized in accordance with the law, and they did not exercise their right to participate, we will win." He put the papers on the table and took off his glasses, wiping them on the edge of his shirt. "Tell me honestly, did you really not know that the house belonged to your sister's ex-husband?" "I didn't know. I didn't even know his last name. I wasn't at the wedding." Grinner nodded. "Okay, that's important. Because if you knew and concealed it, there could be problems with proving the buyer's good faith. But if you just saw the ad and bought it, that's your legal right." "How much will it cost?" I asked quietly. He named the amount. I swallowed. It was half of my savings left after buying the house, but I had no choice. "Okay," I nodded. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in constant tension. I worked at the salon, worked at the restaurant, and in the evenings I sat with Grinner and prepared for court. He explained what to say, how to behave, and which questions to answer. The day of the trial arrived on Thursday. I arrived at the courthouse half an hour before the hearing, wearing my only office suit, a dark blue one I had bought on sale. My hands were shaking as I pushed open the heavy wooden door. My parents and Vivian were already sitting in the courtroom. My mother was wearing a light-colored blouse and skirt, and my father was wearing a dark suit. Vivian was in a black dress with her hair neatly pulled back. They sat on the other side of the room with their lawyer, a young man in an expensive suit, with a folder of documents. When I entered, they looked at me but did not say hello. Grinner was already there. He was sitting at a table, sorting through papers. I sat down next to him, clasping my hands on my knees. "Relax," he said quietly. "We have all the trump cards." The judge entered at 9 o'clock, a stern man in his 50s with gray temples. Everyone stood up. The hearing began. Attorney Vivian spoke first. He filed a motion to invalidate the agreement. "Your Honor, we assert that the auction was conducted in violation of procedure. First, the notice period for the auction was insufficient. My client did not have time to find out about the sale of property that previously belonged to her family. Second, there is a conflict of interest. The defendant is a close relative of the plaintiff and had access to information about the auction earlier than the general public. Third, we believe that the sale price was too low, which indicates possible collusion." I felt my heart pounding. Grinner remained calm, taking notes. The judge looked at him. "Does the defense have any objections?" Grinner stood up. "Your Honor, on each point regarding the publication date, the auction announcement was published in the local newspaper 30 days before the auction, which fully complies with the requirements of the law. Here is a copy of the newspaper with the publication date." He handed the document to the court clerk. Regarding the conflict of interest, my client had no access to information that was unavailable to other citizens. She saw the public announcement just as anyone else could have seen it. She does not work for the authorities that conducted the auction and has no family ties to the organizers. The fact that she is the plaintiff's sister does not create a conflict of interest in this case. Regarding the price, the initial auction price was determined by an appraiser in accordance with the market value of the property, taking into account its condition. My client was the only participant in the auction. If the plaintiff considered the price to be too low, she had the opportunity to participate in the auction and offer a higher amount. Attorney Vivian interrupted. "My client did not have the financial means to participate in the auction." Grinner turned to him. "Then she would not have been able to buy the house under any circumstances. The law does not provide for the free transfer of property on the basis of family ties or emotional attachment." The judge banged his gavel. "Continue, Mr. Grinner." "Your Honor, the plaintiff cannot challenge the agreement solely on the grounds that she does not like the outcome. The auction was conducted legally and my client acted within her rights. We ask that the claim be dismissed." The judge looked at the documents. "Does the plaintiff have evidence of violations during the auction?" "Specific facts, not assumptions." Attorney Vivian unfolded the papers, looking for something. "Your Honor, we can provide evidence that the defendant knew about the family connection." "Knowledge of a family connection is not a violation of the law," the judge interrupted. "The question is whether the auction was conducted in accordance with the procedure. Do you have evidence of procedural violations?" The lawyer paused for a moment, then said, "No, Your Honor, but, great. Then the court sees no grounds for invalidating the agreement," the judge said, putting down his papers. "The auction was conducted legally, the announcement was published on time, and the defendant purchased the property at a public auction. The lawsuit is dismissed." He banged his gavel. "It was over so quickly that I didn't understand right away." Grinner said quietly, "Congratulations, you won." I felt something inside me let go. My parents and Vivian stood up. Mom's face was red. Dad looked angry. Vivian was crying, wiping her eyes with a handkerchief. Their lawyer was explaining something to them quietly, but I saw Dad wave his hand as if to say, "No, don't bother." They left the room without even looking at me. I left the courthouse and for the first time in weeks felt like I could breathe deeply. It was over, finally. But that was only the beginning. A month later, I received a new summons. Appeal. They filed an appeal. I sat in the kitchen with the papers in my hands and couldn't believe it. I called Grinner. "They're at it again. How can they?" His voice was calm. "They have the right to appeal, but don't worry. The decision of the court of first instance was correct. The appeals court will uphold it." But his voice did not reassure me. I understood that this meant another trial, more money for a lawyer, more stress. The second trial was even more difficult. The appeals court was in a larger hall and there were 3 judges, 2 men and a woman. The atmosphere was more formal, colder. Vivian's lawyer tried a different approach. "Your Honor, we are not challenging the legality of the auction. We draw the court's attention to the fact that the plaintiff was not properly notified of the auction. Quim sisi course." The house was previously marital property, and although the marriage had been dissolved, the plaintiff had a moral right to know about the sale. The chief judge, a gray-haired man with a stern face, interrupted. "Moral right is not a legal category. Was the plaintiff the owner of the property at the time of the auction?" "No, but..." "Did she have legal grounds to claim the property?" The lawyer paused for a moment. "Legally, no, but from the point of view of justice." "The court is guided by the law, not by abstract notions of justice," said the female judge. "Continue." They called Vivian to the stand. She took the oath, her voice trembling. Her lawyer asked, "Tell the court why this house is so important to you." Vivian began to cry. "It was my home. I lived there for 3 years. When we lost it because of debt, I thought I could buy it back later. I was saving money, but my sister, she bought it. And now I have nothing. This is my only chance for a normal life." Grinner stood up. "Ms. Dahmer, you claim that you were saving money to buy back the house." "Yes." "How much had you saved by the time of the auction?" Vivian was confused. About $5,000. "The starting price at the auction was $20,000. Even if you had participated in the bidding, you would not have been able to buy it. Isn't that right?" She remained silent. "Answer the question," said the chief judge. "Yes," whispered Vivian, "but I could have taken out a loan." "You could have, but you didn't. Instead, you hired a lawyer and went to court. How much did you pay for legal services?" Vivian's lawyer stood up. "Objection! That's irrelevant." "Objection sustained," nodded the judge. "Mr. Grinner, get to the point." "The point is, Your Honor, that the plaintiff did not take advantage of the legal opportunity to participate in the auction and is now trying to obtain the property through the courts for free. That's not how the law works. The Court of Appeals upheld the decision. I won again." The judge said briefly, "The court of first instance correctly applied the law. There are no grounds for overturning the decision. The appeal was dismissed." We left the courthouse. It was a cold October day, and the wind was blowing yellow leaves from the trees. My parents and Vivian followed behind, passing me as if I were invisible. I was saying goodbye to Grinner at the entrance when I heard a voice behind me. "Emily?" I turned around. In front of me stood a man of about 35 wearing a worn leather jacket and jeans. His face was thin with several days' stubble, and his dark hair was slightly long. He looked tired and a little dangerous. "Yes, I'm Curtis Dahmer, Vivian's ex-husband." I involuntarily took a step back. Grinner stood alert beside me. "What do you want?" I asked. Curtis raised his hands in a conciliatory gesture. "Calm down. I just want to talk about the house." "We have nothing to talk about. Listen." He took a step closer. He smelled of cigarettes and something pungent. Machine oil, perhaps. I know the court ruled in your favor, I don't dispute that. But that house, it means a lot to me. I want to buy it back. I glanced at Grinner. He nodded slightly as if to say, listen. How much did you pay for it? Curtis asked. 20,000? 22? Okay, I'll give you 12. Cash, within a week. I couldn't believe my ears. 12? For a house I bought for 22? Listen, I'm in a difficult situation right now. 12 is all I can give you, but it's fast, no paperwork, no questions asked. I understood what he was talking about. Cash, no questions asked. It meant something shady. No, I said firmly, the house is not for sale. Curtis's face darkened. He clenched his jaw, the muscles in his face tensing. You'll regret this. Is that a threat? Grinner intervened, taking out his phone. I can call the police right now. Curtis looked at him, then back at me. There was something cold and cruel in his eyes. This is a warning. Think about it while you still have time. He turned and walked to an old pickup truck parked nearby. The engine roared, and the car pulled out of the parking lot with a screech of tires. I watched him go, feeling something cold crawl down my spine. Don't worry about it, Grinner said, putting his phone away. He's just angry. But if he bothers you again, call the police right away. And me. I nodded, but the feeling of anxiety wouldn't go away. Curtis's words kept spinning in my head. You'll regret it. The next few days, I worked as usual. The salon, the restaurant, home. I tried not to think about Curtis, about his threats. But at night, I slept poorly, waking up at every little noise. On Friday evening, I worked at the restaurant until late at night. It was a difficult shift. A full house, constant orders. One customer was rude about the cold soup and didn't leave a tip. When I finally left at 1 a.m, my legs could barely hold me up. I rode home on my old bike. I didn't have a car. The road was empty, with only the occasional car passing by. The cold wind blew through my jacket. I pedaled, thinking only of finally going to bed. When I turned onto my street, I saw something strange. There was a sharp, acrid smell in the air. Smoke? I sped up. My heart began to beat faster. When I rode up to my house, I saw it. Near the back entrance where there was a small porch, flames were licking the walls. The fire was already a meter high, licking the wooden wall, black smoke rising into the sky. I dropped my bike and ran to the house, shouting, "Fire! Help! Fire!" The windows in the neighboring houses began to light up. A neighbor from the house across the street, a man in his 40s named Dave, looked out the window, saw the flames, and immediately disappeared inside. A minute later, he ran out with a fire extinguisher, wearing pajamas and rubber boots. "Get back!" he shouted at me. He began to extinguish the fire with white foam. I stood nearby, helpless, clenching my hands, watching as the flames slowly died down. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Someone had already called the fire department. The fire truck arrived in 5 minutes, red, with flashing lights cutting through the darkness. The firefighters jumped out, unrolled the hose, and began to douse the remaining flames. The water hissed on the hot boards, raising clouds of steam. I stood in the street, hugging myself, and watched. Neighbors came out of their houses, gathered in groups, and whispered. Someone threw a blanket over my shoulders. 20 minutes later, the fire was completely extinguished. The fire chief, a large man with a mustache, surveyed the scene. We're lucky the neighbor reacted quickly. A little longer and the fire would have spread to the roof. Then it would have been impossible to save. He crouched down by the burnt porch and shone his flashlight. See here? He pointed to the remains of a rag soaked in something dark. Someone deliberately set the fire. It was arson. I felt a chill inside. I wasn't surprised. Somewhere deep down, I already knew. You need to call the police, he said, getting up, and don't go inside until you're sure the structure is safe. I nodded, unable to say a word. I stood in my yard looking at the charred corner of my house, the black smoke marks on the wall, the puddles of water dripping from the porch. Someone had tried to burn down my house, and I knew who. The police arrived an hour later. 2 patrol officers, a young man with red curls and an older woman with a tired face. They inspected the burned porch, asked a few questions, and took down my information. "Do you have any suspicions about who might have done this?" asked the female officer, without looking up from her notebook. I wanted to mention Curtis, his threats outside the courthouse, but something stopped me. What if I was wrong? What if it was someone else? "No," I replied. "I don't know." The policewoman nodded and closed her notebook. "Okay, we'll file a report and pass the case on to the detectives. If you remember anything, give us a call." The next morning, I called a repairman to assess the damage. The porch was completely destroyed. Part of the wall was burned and repairs were needed. The repairman quoted a price of $2,000. My heart sank. I didn't have that kind of money. Everything I had left after buying the house and paying the lawyer went to the bare necessities. I went to work at the salon. Judy immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Emily, you look terrible. What happened?" I told her about the fire. She hugged me and held me close to her chest. "My God, child, did you go to the police?" "Yes, but—" Judy stepped back and looked me in the eyes. "Do you know who it could have been?" I was silent. I knew, but I couldn't prove it. That same day, during my lunch break, I sat in a small room behind the salon eating a sandwich and trying not to think about everything that had happened. There was a knock at the door. Judy peeked in. "Someone's here to see you." I went out into the main hall. Curtis was standing at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. I stopped in the middle of the hall, my hands involuntarily clenching into fists. "What do you want?" My voice came out sharper than I intended. Curtis raised his hands. "Hey, calm down. I just wanted to see how you were doing. I heard about the fire." Terrible, isn't it? He spoke softly, sympathetically, but there was a cold mockery in his eyes. He knew. I was sure he knew. "How did you find out?" I asked. "News travels fast in a small town," he smiled. "Vivian told me. She's worried about you, by the way. Everyone is." Lies. Pure lies. "Thanks for your concern, but I'll be fine." Curtis moved closer. Judy stood behind me and I could feel her presence, her support. "Listen, I know things didn't work out between us," Curtis said, "but I really want to help. Maybe now you'll reconsider selling the house? I can raise the price to 15. I know you need money for repairs. 15,000. Still less than I paid, but more than 12. "No," I said. "The house is not for sale." "Emily, be reasonable." "I've already called the police," I said. "They're investigating the arson. The detectives are working on the case, so if it happens again, it won't be me who suffers." Curtis's face changed. The softness disappeared, replaced by something sharp and frightened. He took a step back. "Yeah, well, okay. I hope they find who did it." "I hope so, too," I said, looking him straight in the eye. He turned and walked out quickly. The bell above the door jingled. I stood there, watching him through the shop window. He got into his pickup truck and drove away without even looking back. Judy came up to me. "It was him, wasn't it?" I nodded. "But I can't prove it." The week passed slowly. The police didn't get in touch. I called twice and was told that they were busy with work and that the detectives were checking out leads. But I could hear in their voices that they didn't care. Arson of a small house on the outskirts of town. No casualties, no major damage. There are more important cases. I realized that if I wanted to find out the truth, I would have to take action myself. I found a private investigator through an acquaintance from the restaurant. He gave me a phone number and said, "Erwin Schell, former cop, worked in the police force for 30 years. Retired 5 years ago, now doing private investigations. If anyone can find the truth, it's him." I called. A man's voice, hoarse from cigarettes, answered after the third ring. "Hello. Mr. Schell, my name is Emily Creswell. I need your help. 43 Maple Street, tomorrow at 2 o'clock in the afternoon." And he hung up without waiting for an answer. The next day, I went to see him. The house was small, one-story, with peeling paint on the walls. I knocked on the door. A man of about 52 opened it, thin, wrinkled, with gray hair tied back in a short ponytail. He was wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt. "Emily." He glanced at me from under his bushy eyebrows. "Come in." Inside, it smelled of cigarette smoke and coffee. The room was cluttered with folders, maps of the city hung on the walls, photographs, some notes. The table was covered with papers. "Sit down," Irwin pointed to a chair. "Tell me everything." I told him everything, about the house, the courts, Curtis, the arson. Irvin listened silently, occasionally taking a drag on his cigarette. When I finished, he crushed the cigarette butt in the ashtray. "How much are you willing to pay?" I named the amount, everything I had been able to save over the past week. "It wasn't much." Irwin looked at me, then smiled crookedly, wrinkling his face. "Okay, I don't work for big money. I work when the case is interesting, and this one could be interesting enough." He got up and took the keys from the table. "Let's go to your house." I wanted to see the scene of the arson. We drove in his old sedan, which smelled of tobacco and something else. Oil, maybe. Irwin was silent on the way, only occasionally tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. When we arrived, he got out of the car and stood for a long time looking at the house. Then he walked over to the burnt porch, crouched down, and began to examine the remains. He took a flashlight out of his pocket and shone it into the cracks between the boards. He searched for something, found a piece of debris, and put it in a plastic bag. "Homemade fuel," he muttered. "Kerosene mixed with something else. An amateur." Then he asked for the keys to the house. I gave them to him. We went inside. Irwin walked through the rooms, examining the walls, the floor, looking into the closets. When he reached the basement door, he stopped. "What's down there?" "I don't know. I haven't been down there yet. Probably just old stuff from the previous owners." Irwin opened the door. The stairs led down into darkness. He turned on his flashlight and started down. I followed him. The basement was small, with concrete walls and a low ceiling. It smelled musty and chemical. Irwin shone his flashlight around the corners, then stopped at an old metal table in the corner. "Look here," he said, pointing to the tabletop. I walked over. The table was covered with strange stains, whitish, yellowish, with some kind of coating. Irwin took a stick out of his pocket, scraped off some of the coating, and sniffed it. His face became serious. "They cook drugs here?" he said quietly. "Methamphetamine, most likely. See these traces? These are chemical residues." And here, he shone his light into a corner where several empty plastic canisters stood. Are containers for reagents. I felt a chill spread through my body. "What? Your house was used as a drug lab?" Irvin straightened up. "We need to call the police. This is serious." I couldn't move. I stared at the table, the canisters, the stains on the floor. Drugs were being cooked in my house. Irwin had already taken out his phone and was calling. He spoke briefly and clearly, giving the address. Then he turned to me. "Let's go upstairs. It's better not to touch anything here." We went upstairs and sat in the kitchen, waiting for the police. I sat with my arms around myself, trying to comprehend what I had heard. Drugs in my house. The police arrived quickly. This time, it wasn't patrol officers, but detectives. 2 men in plain clothes. One was tall, the other short, both with tired faces. They went down to the basement with Irvin and spent about an hour there. When they came back up, the tall detective said, "We'll take samples for analysis. But I can confirm that there was a laboratory here. It had probably been operating for a few months. No more." "Who could have done this?" I asked. "The previous owner, most likely. Curtis Dahmer. We'll check it out." They left me their contact information and asked me not to go into the basement until they had finished their investigation. Then they left. I sat in the kitchen looking out the window. Irwin poured me a glass of water, Drink up. You need to calm down. I drank it. The water was cold and helped clear my head a little. Now the police will be interested in the case. Irwin said, drugs are serious. They'll start digging. I nodded, and then it suddenly dawned on me. Curtis, I whispered. He wanted this house back so badly, and Vivian too. They knew about the lab. They wanted to destroy the evidence. Irwin sat down opposite me. That makes sense. Your sister might be involved too. If she lived here with Curtis, she might have known. Or helped, I added quietly. Irwin nodded. We need to keep an eye on them. If they're involved in the arson and the drugs, they'll be nervous now. People under pressure make mistakes. We just need to catch them. Can you keep an eye on them? I asked. I can. It will cost more, but... He paused and looked at me. How much do you have? I named the amount, my remaining savings, the last I had. Irvin nodded. That's enough for a week. I'll keep an eye on your sister and her ex. If they're up to something, I'll find out. The next few days dragged on like a nightmare. I worked, came home, tried not to think about the drugs being cooked under my feet in the basement. The police took samples for testing and said the results would be ready in a week. Irvin called twice, briefly, like just to say that everything was under control, that he was watching. I tried to live a normal life, but every rustle, every shadow outside the window made me jump. On Friday night, my phone rang at 3 a.m. I woke up to the sharp sound and grabbed the phone. The name on the screen was Irwin Shell. Hello. My voice was hoarse from sleep. Emily, Irwin's voice sounded excited. I recorded their conversation. You need to hear this. You'll understand everything. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. What? Where are you? I'm on my way to you. Be ready. What I heard, it changes everything. He hung up. I sat in the dark, clutching my phone, and waited. Irwin arrived 20 minutes later. I had time to get dressed and make coffee. When there was a knock at the door, I opened it immediately. He stood in the doorway with a small voice recorder in his hand, his face gray with fatigue. Come in. I stepped back. We sat down at the kitchen table. Irwin placed the recorder between us and poured himself some coffee from my Turkish coffee pot. I followed Vivian all evening, he began, wrapping his hands around the hot cup. She went to a bar on the outskirts of town, the one near the highway. She sat there for an hour, drinking something, looking nervous. Then Curtis arrived. They got into his car. I parked nearby and set up a microphone under their window. The quality isn't perfect, but you can hear everything. He pressed play. At first, there was only noise, the engine, music from afar. Then Vivian's voice, high-pitched, panicked. Curtis, the police were at her house. They definitely found something. I heard from my mom. She called and said that detectives had been there. Curtis's voice was lower, irritated. Calm down. They won't prove anything. How can they not prove anything? You said yourself that there could be traces left there. You promised you cleaned everything up. I cleaned up as much as I could, but that basement... I didn't have time to clean everything up properly when the bank took the house. Pause. A rustling sound, as if someone is moving in the seat. You should have burned it right away. Vivian's voice trembled. You shouldn't have waited. I tried, but that stupid porch wouldn't catch fire properly, and then the fire department showed up. God, Curtis, if the police start digging, they'll get to me. I was there. I knew they'll put me away. You didn't do anything. You just cleaned up sometimes when I asked you to. That's not a crime. But I knew. I knew what you were doing in that basement. I saw the equipment, the canisters. You asked me to take out the trash to clean up the empty reagent containers. If the police find my fingerprints on something there are no fingerprints. I wiped everything you touched. You can't be sure. What if something's left? What if someone saw me taking out those trash bags? Curtis's voice became harsher. No one saw anything. You're paranoid. I'm not paranoid. I just understand that if they find me, if anything points to me... Curtis, I could go to prison. I can't handle prison. Silence. Then Curtis again. Listen, we have to act. If the police find concrete evidence in the basement, they'll start looking for everyone who had access to the house. They could come after you. We have to do something. What? What can we do? I don't know. Maybe try to reach out to your sister somehow. Convince her to sell the house to me or let me go in there and clean everything up for good. If she gives me a day, just one day in the house, I'll destroy everything in there. The police won't find anything. She won't let me. You've seen how stubborn she is. She hates me. Then I don't know, but we can't just sit here and do nothing. If the police come after you, I'll go down too. Do you understand? We're in this together. I don't want to be in this together. Vivian's voice trembled with tears. I never did. I just wanted to help you. You said it wouldn't be for long, that you'd make some money and stop. You promised. I know I promised, but things didn't work out. The recording broke off, the sound of an engine, a door slamming. Silence. Irvin turned off the tape recorder. I sat motionless. My ears were ringing. Vivian knew. Maybe she didn't cook the drugs herself. Maybe she didn't sell them, but she knew. She covered it up. She helped cover it up by cleaning up the traces of his work. I couldn't find the words. This is proof. Yes, Irwin nodded. It's enough for the police to launch a serious investigation. She admits that she knew about the drug production and helped cover up the traces. Even if she didn't actively participate, it's still complicity. If you give them the recording, they'll arrest both of them. They'll interrogate them and start digging deeper. Your sister will get a sentence. Maybe a short one if she has a good lawyer, but she'll get one. I looked at the tape recorder, a small black device that contained a confession that could destroy my sister's life. What are you going to do? Irwin asked quietly. I didn't answer right away, I thought. Vivian was involved, not as deeply as Curtis, but involved. She knew about the drugs, covered it up, cleaned up after him. She lied to my parents, turned them against me, sued for the house, and Curtis tried to burn my house down. I owe them nothing. But she was my sister, my only sister. I want to talk to her, I said finally, at first, alone. Irwin nodded. That's your right. But be careful. If she finds out about the recording, she might try something. I'll be careful. The next morning, I wrote Vivian a message. Short, emotionless. I need to talk to you. Well, let's meet at the coffee shop on Main Street at 2 o'clock. It's important. The reply came an hour later. Okay. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes before 2. It was a small, cozy place with wooden tables and the smell of freshly baked bread. I ordered coffee, sat by the window, and waited. Vivian showed up right at 2. She looked terrible. Her face was gaunt. She had dark circles under her eyes, and her hair was pulled back into a messy bun. She was wearing some old sweater and jeans that were worn out at the knees. She sat down opposite me without ordering anything. What do you want, Emily? Her voice was tired and emotionless. I took my phone out of my pocket and placed it on the table between us. There was an audio file icon on the screen. I have a recording of your conversation with Curtis from yesterday, from his car. Vivian's face didn't change at first. Then it turned pale. Her eyes widened. What? You heard me. A recording where you say you knew Curtis was cooking drugs in the basement, where you say you cleaned up after him, took out the trash with the chemicals, where Curtis says he tried to burn down my house. She was silent. Her lips trembled. That's not true. You're making it up. I pressed play. Vivian's voice came out of the speaker. I knew what you were doing in that basement. You asked me to take out the trash, clean up the empty reagent containers. I turned it off. Vivian sat with her hands clasped on her knees. Her face was red, her eyes filled with tears. You were watching me? I hired a detective. He followed you and Curtis. Vivian stood up abruptly. The chair slid back with a bang. Several visitors turned around. You have no right, she shouted. This is my private life. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just helping to clean up. Sit down, I said coldly. Otherwise, I'll go straight to the police and give them this recording. And everyone will hear how you were just cleaning up. She froze, slowly sat back down. Tears ran down her cheeks, but she didn't wipe them away. Emily, please. Tell me, I interrupted, everything from the beginning, and don't you dare lie. I can hear everything on the recording. She swallowed and wiped her face with her sleeve. Her hands were shaking. Curtis. He started cooking drugs about 3 years ago. At first, it was just a little for friends, he said. Then it got bigger. He rented that house and then bought it. He said it was profitable, that no one was watching the neighborhood. I didn't know at first. I swear I didn't know. But when did you find out? A year later, maybe a little more. I saw the equipment in the basement. These strange glass flasks, canisters, some kind of tubes. I asked what it was. He didn't want to tell me for a long time, but then he confessed. I wanted to leave, but... She fell silent, staring at the table. But he convinced me to stay. He said it wouldn't be for long, that he would make money and stop, that we needed money for the future, for the children, for a normal life. And you believed him? Yes, she whispered. I'm stupid. I believed him. And then he started asking me for little things to help him take the trash out of the basement. Empty canisters, some used filters, rags. He said it was dangerous to throw it in the regular trash, that it had to be disposed of. I did it. Sometimes, not often, but I did it. I took the trash in bags, drove it to a dump outside the city, and burned it there. Her voice broke. Sometimes he asked me to just clean up the basement after work. Wipe the surfaces, wash the floor. He said it was hard for him to do it himself after a long day at work. I didn't realize that I was becoming an accomplice. I just thought I was helping my husband. You helped cover up a crime, I said harshly. I know. She raised her voice, but then lowered it, glancing at the other visitors. I know, I made a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. When everything started to fall apart, when the bank started to take the house because of Curtis's debts, I realized I had to run away. I filed for divorce and moved back in with my parents. I thought it was over. I thought Curtis had taken everything, that there were no traces left. But then I bought the house. She nodded, wiping away new tears. Yes, when my mother told me you bought the house at auction, I didn't believe it. I couldn't believe such a coincidence. I thought you knew you wanted to catch me or something. But then I realized you just didn't know. You bought it because it was cheap and you got scared. Yes, I got scared. There could be traces left in the basement. My fingerprints on something I wiped down. Or someone could have seen me taking out the trash. If the police came there, if they started an investigation, they'd put me in jail. I know they'll put me in jail, even if I was just cleaning up. She bowed her head, her shoulders shaking with sobs. I sat there looking at her, feeling a mixture of emotions, anger, pity, disappointment. She wasn't a criminal. She was a foolish, weak woman who loved the wrong man and did foolish things for him. But she was still guilty. You convinced my parents to take me to court, I said quietly. You told them I stole your house. Yes, she whispered. I told them it was unfair, that you knew about the relationship with Curtis and bought the house on purpose to hurt me. They believed me. They always believed me. I didn't tell them about the drugs. Never. They don't know. If they find out... Her voice trailed off, and Curtis tried to burn down the house. I didn't ask him to do that. She raised her head, her eyes red and desperate. I swear on everything that is holy, I didn't ask him. I just told him that you didn't want to sell, that the police might start an investigation after they saw that basement. He decided on his own that if he burned the house, he would destroy the evidence. I found out about it after he tried. When he called me and said it didn't work, that the fire department had arrived. She wiped her face with her palms, smearing the mascara under her eyes. I didn't want you to get hurt, Emily. I just wanted to survive, not go to prison. That's all I wanted. I leaned back in my chair. It all made sense. Vivian wasn't the mastermind. She didn't cook drugs or sell them. She just turned a blind eye, cleaned up after her husband, hoping everything would work out somehow. Weak, scared, confused, but she knew. She hid it. She helped. "What do you want from me?" Vivian asked quietly. "I know I did everything wrong. I know I deserve to be punished, but I beg you, don't give this recording to the police. Please. I can't handle prison. I can't." "Why should I help you?" I asked. "After everything you've done, after the trials, the lies, after your ex tried to burn down my house." "Because I'm your sister," she whispered. "I know it doesn't mean much now. I know I ruined everything between us, but please, I'll do whatever you say, anything. If I have to, I'll confess everything to our parents. If I have to, I'll give you all the money I have. Just not the police, please." I looked at her tear-stained face, her trembling hands, the despair in her eyes. Part of me wanted to get up and leave, give the recording to the police, watch them take her away in handcuffs. Part of me thought she deserved it. But another part didn't see a criminal. I saw a foolish, frightened woman who had made mistakes and was now paying for them, who had been my sister before she became a stranger. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But if you try to contact Curtis even once to warn him or anything like that, I'll go straight to the police. Understand?" She nodded, holding her breath. "Understand. I won't. I promise. I'll never talk to him again." "Go home," I said. "Wait for my call." I picked up the phone from the table and stood up. Vivian looked up at me, her eyes full of hope and fear. I left the cafe without looking back. The cold air hit my face, clearing my head. I walked down the street, clutching the phone in my pocket, and thought. I had a weapon in my hands that could destroy Vivian's life. One call to the police, and it would all be over. She would be arrested, tried, and imprisoned. Her parents would learn the truth about their beloved daughter. She would lose everything, and part of me wanted that. I wanted justice. I wanted her to answer for everything. For the years of neglect, for the lies, for the lawsuits, for her complicity in crimes. But another part of me was tired of anger, of fighting, of hatred. I just wanted to live, just to be happy in my house, which I had worked so hard to earn. I stopped by my bike and unlocked it. I took out my phone and looked at the audio file icon. I could destroy her life. But did I want that? The next day, I gave the recording to Erwin. Not all of it. Just the part where Curtis talked about the arson and how he hadn't had time to clean up all the evidence from the basement. I cut out the part about Vivian. "Are you sure?" Erwin asked when I gave him the flash drive with the edited file. "Yes," I replied. "This is enough to arrest Curtis. The rest is none of my business." He looked at me intently, then nodded. "Okay. I'll pass it on to the detectives tonight." Curtis was arrested 2 days later. I found out from the news, a short note in the local newspaper. "Man arrested on suspicion of manufacturing methamphetamine and arson." The photo of Curtis was the same thin man in a worn jacket, only now in handcuffs. Erwin called that evening. "They took him in this morning. They searched his house and found equipment and chemicals, plus your recording as evidence of arson. He's being held without bail." "Is he saying anything?" "He's keeping quiet for now. He's hired a lawyer, but the detectives say they have enough evidence. He'll be in for a long time." I felt relieved. Finally, the person who tried to burn down my house will be punished. But the peace didn't last long. A week later, Erwin called again. "Emily, we have a problem. Curtis has started talking. He turned in some of his accomplices. Suppliers, buyers. The detectives are happy, but they want to come back to your house and conduct another search, a more thorough one, to look for evidence of Curtis's connections to other people." My heart skipped a beat. "When?" "I don't know exactly. Maybe in a few days, maybe in a week, they're getting a search warrant. If there's anything there, they'll find it. I thanked them and hung up. I sat in the kitchen and staring out the window. If the police searched the house thoroughly, they might find Vivian's fingerprints on something in the basement or other evidence of her involvement. And then everything I've been trying to hide will come out. The phone rang late in the evening. Vivian. I hesitated to answer, but finally picked up. Emily. Her voice trembled. I heard about Curtis. He's been arrested. I know. Mom said she heard from someone that the police want to search your house again. Is that true? I was silent for a moment, then said, Yes, it's true. There was a quiet sob. Oh my God, Emily, if they come, if they start searching seriously, they'll find it. My fingerprints are on those cans I wiped down, or on some other things. I don't remember exactly what I touched there. Curtis said he wiped everything, but what if he didn't? What do you want from me? Let me come there, clean it up. I know what could be where. Give me one day, just one. I'll make sure the police don't find anything, please. I sat looking out the dark window. My face was reflected in the glass, tired, with dark circles under my eyes. I could have refused. I could have let the police come and find everything that was there. I could have watched Vivian get arrested, or... How much is this house worth on the market right now? I asked suddenly. Vivian fell silent, surprised. What? How much is it worth? If you wanted to buy it now, on the open market, how much would you pay? I don't know, maybe $25,000. It's old, it needs repairs. $44,000, I said clearly. Double what I paid for it. You buy the house from me for $44,000, and then it's yours. Do whatever you want with it. What? Emily, I don't have that kind of money. Find it. You have 3 days before the police file a warrant. If you bring me $44,000 in cash in 3 days, the house is yours. If not, there's nothing I can do to help you. Emily, please, that's impossible. 3 days, I repeated, and hung up the phone. I didn't know if she would be able to find that kind of money, but if she could, I would not only get my expenses back, I would double them. I would be able to buy a new house, a better one, start a truly new life. And Vivian would be able to cover her tracks and avoid prison, or she wouldn't be able to, and then fate would decide for me. The next 3 days dragged on like an eternity. I worked at the salon, worked at the restaurant, tried not to think about the deadline. Vivian didn't call or text. I didn't know what she was doing, whether she was trying to find the money or had already given up. On the third day at 8 o'clock in the evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it. Vivian was standing on the doorstep with a large sports bag in her hands. Her face was pale, her eyes red from lack of sleep. "Can I come in?" she asked quietly. I stepped back, letting her in. She came in, put the bag on the floor in the hallway, and unzipped it. Inside was money, bundles of bills neatly tied with rubber bands. $44,000, Vivian said hoarsely. "Count it if you don't believe me." I sat down and took one bundle. I counted a few bills. They were real. I looked at Vivian. "Where did you get it?" "My parents gave me everything they had, all their savings. Dad wanted to buy a new pickup truck and had been saving for 2 years. Mom was saving up to repair the roof. They gave everything they had." Her voice trembled. "And I took out loans for the rest, from 3 different banks, at terrible interest rates. I'll be paying it off for 10 years, maybe more." She wiped her eyes with her hand. "But that doesn't matter. What matters is that the money is here. Is the house mine now?" I looked at the bag of money, then at Vivian. She looked broken. Her parents had given away their savings. She had gotten herself into debt for years to come, all to cover up her mistake. "Yes," I nodded. "The house is yours. I'll draw up the papers tomorrow. I'll bring them to you to sign." Vivian took a long, shaky breath. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. You paid twice what it's worth." "I know, but it's better than prison." She picked up her bag and placed it on the floor next to me. "Can I go down to the basement? Now? I want to get everything done today before the police arrive." I looked at her for a long time, then nodded. "Do what you have to do." "I'll be upstairs." Vivian went down to the basement. I could hear her moving around, rummaging through things, scraping. An hour later, she came back up with 2 large trash bags. "That's it," she said. "I took everything I could touch." I wiped all the surfaces with a fingerprint remover. "Now there's nothing left. Where are you going to take it?" I nodded at the bags. "I'll burn them, far outside the city, just like I did before." Vivian picked up the bags. I'll go. I'll sign the papers when you bring them. And then I don't think we'll see each other again." "I think you're right." She walked to the door, looked back at the threshold. "Emily, I'm really sorry about everything. About my parents not loving you as much as they loved me. About not protecting you. About everything." "I know," I said quietly, "but it doesn't matter anymore." She left. The door closed behind her with a soft click. I stood in the empty hallway staring at the gym bag full of money. $44,000, twice what I had paid for the house, enough to buy something better, to start a truly new life. The next morning, I drew up all the documents. Vivian signed the purchase agreement and transfer of ownership without reading them. We met at the notary's office, exchanged documents, and went our separate ways. No goodbyes, no hugs. A week later, I saw an ad in the newspaper. "House for sale on the outskirts of town. Inexpensive, needs renovation." The same house. Vivian was selling it. Obviously, she had done what she wanted, removed all traces, and now she was getting rid of it as quickly as possible. She was trying to get at least some of her money back. My parents didn't call anymore. They didn't write. I saw my mother once in the supermarket. She immediately turned around and went to another aisle, as if she hadn't noticed me. I didn't try to catch up with her. I looked for a new home for almost a month. I looked at dozens of options, some too expensive, others in poor condition, others in the wrong neighborhoods, until I found it. It was in the central part of the city, on a quiet street with maple trees lining the sidewalk, 2 stories with white walls and blue tiles on the roof, a small garden in front, a larger yard in the back, a wide porch with a swing, large, bright windows. It cost $40,000. I paid in cash. The move took a week. I didn't have many things. A few bags of clothes, books, dishes. I hired a small truck and moved everything myself. Judy helped unpack the boxes and brought potted flowers for the new house. "You belong here," she said, watching me arrange things on the new shelves. "You look happy." I paused and thought, yes, I think I am happy. I spent my first evening in the new house on the porch. I sat on the swing with a cup of coffee, watching the sun set behind the roofs of the neighboring houses. The sky turned pink and orange. Birds were singing somewhere nearby. Children were playing in the street, their laughter echoing throughout the neighborhood. I thought about everything that had happened, about the house I had bought and lost, about my sister who had betrayed me and then paid for her freedom, about my parents who never loved me as much as they loved her, about 13 years of work, sweat, and fatigue. I didn't know if I had done the right thing, but I had started a new life. Without the past, without the family that didn't appreciate me, without the burden of unpaid debts. The coffee in my cup had grown cold. I took the last sip and placed the cup on the wooden porch floor. The swing swayed quietly under my weight. Curtis was sentenced to 8 years. I read about it in the newspaper. Vivian never appeared in my life again. Sometimes I thought about her. How she was paying off those loans. How she was living with what she had done. But these thoughts came rarely and did not linger for long. My parents lost all their savings. Lost. Dad never bought a new pickup truck. Mom never repaired the roof. I knew this from Judy, who heard it from someone in town. I didn't feel sorry for them. The sun disappeared behind the horizon, leaving behind only a pale blue sky with the first stars. I got up from the swing, took the empty cup, and went into the house. My house. I locked the door and turned off the porch light. I went to the kitchen, washed the cup, and put it in the dish rack. I looked through the window at the dark yard where the apple tree branch swayed quietly. I was free. Finally, after so many years, I was finally free.